Welcome to the Branding Room Only podcast, where we share career stories, strategies, and lessons learned on how industry leaders and influencers have built their personal brands. Now, let's get started with the show. Hi, everybody. So, when you set an intention and it comes to fruition, what you're about to experience is that happening. Vernā Myers, for me, is like the Beyonce of the DEI world. And when I first started practicing in DEI, she was somebody who I looked up to, and I continue to do so. And this conversation is going to knock your socks off, where she's telling you all the things. And I can't wait for you to hear it. So here goes. Hi, everybody. It's Paula Edgar, your host of Branding Room Only. And I am so excited about my conversation today with someone who I respect and love from afar, but I'm going to love her near now, Vernā Myers. Vernā is a DEI pioneer. She's a highly sought after DEI keynote speaker and DEI consultant. She is the founder and president of the Vernā Myers Company and was the first executive head of inclusion at Netflix. Aside from her TED Talk on bias, which you're all going to listen to because I'm putting it in the notes, she is a well-known and globally cited for her trademark quote, "Diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance." Y'all, I love it so much. I have it on a t-shirt. Vernā, welcome to the Branding Room.
Thank you, Paula. I'm so happy to be here. And I have admired you from afar as well. So I'm glad we have closed the distance.
I love that. All right. So let's get started. I ask everybody this question, which is, what does a personal brand mean to you? How do you define it?
For me, I think your brand is what people have become accustomed to expecting from you. It's what they see and also what they think you will be delivering. And the ability to do that consistently, I think, is the real trick to creating a brand, because I noticed that some people can show up one way on this day and differently on another day. And I don't remember, but it was years ago where I read this book about entrepreneurship and how McDonald's was so completely successful. And it was because every time people walked into a McDonald's, they knew exactly what to expect. Mm-hmm. The French fries taste the same. The setup is the same. And while my business is a service business, mm-hmm. and it's client to client, the brand kind of develops when clients tell other clients, mm-hmm. this is who this person is, this is what you can expect, and for that to actually be delivered consistent.
I love that. What a robust, really complete brand definition. So thank you for that, putting that in the clip. Okay. Speaking of brand, how would you define yourself in 3 words or short phrases?
Now that's a hard one, but I'm trying to figure these things out. I would describe myself as a person of integrity. Mm-hmm. So integral, or however that is mentioned. I am also a person of excellence. So it doesn't mean I'm excellent at everything, but it does mean that I want to do the very best at all the things that I'm putting my heart and mind and soul to. And then I would also say soulful.
Soulful, yes.
Right, which is right there with spiritual. So I don't know which is the best word, but when I say soulful, I mean all the work that I'm doing is ultimately informed by my soul, mm-hmm. and how I want to be in the world and how I see others and want others to see me. And so I don't know. Those are my 3.
Those are great. And you used 2 brand words that I use all the time in your definition of your brand, which is excellence, always striving for it. That's a part of good branding, and to have integrity and to commit to your values. That's all a part of the brand proposition when you are doing it right, when you're striving for it to be done well. All right. This is funny because if you say your quote, I'm going to be like, this is perfect. What is your favorite quote?
Since you're talking about brand, I gotta say it. That diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance. And who knew that that particular quote would resonate all over the world with so many different types of people? I mean, it's kind of amazing. And I also want to append, now I kind of want to append things to it because now we talk about equity. So I was like, and equity is making sure you have a diverse planning committee. I don't know for the party, but it is definitely a quote that has meant a lot to me because it was a discovery in the work. As I was doing the work, I started to see the difference between having difference and actually employing and utilizing that difference so that it's a true asset and so that people actually get to be involved, not like, you know, standing on the walls, like when you go to a very awkward middle school party or like, or ninth grade, and you're just like, oh, I hope I get in. I hope I get in. And that's what I was seeing, Paula. I was seeing people who were officially at the party, at the organization, but they weren't on the sexy, money generating, high profile, stretch type assignments. And I thought, okay, now this is a dynamic that needs to be spoken to. And so, yeah, so I love my quote and
I love it too.
people feel seen.
Yes, it's true. I think the reason why the quote resonates so much is because everybody wants to be included, right? Everybody wants to be invited and they want to be, and then when they're invited, they want to be included. You know, what's a Soul Train line with not anybody being on it?
Seriously. And people know this in every type of organization. They know it in politics. They know it, for example, in your own family life, when you go to someone's house in your family, but you never quite feel included, right? You don't get to speak up. No one asks ask you for your opinion, or the presumption is whatever it is already. And so you don't really have the quality. That's the thing I was trying to get to. It was, what is the quality of experience?
Yeah.
And it's really, I say it's a lot about being expected, being reflected, and also being respected.
Ooh.
Those three really distinguish a person's experience. Did you expect me? Did you expect me to be the brilliant one on this particular thing? Am I reflected in how you think about things and as you're creating programming and opportunities, and then respected? Am I getting a chance to show how fabulous I am? You know?
Right. Yes. And also I love alliteration and I love rhyming. So there we go. There we go with that. Speaking of that, What is your hype song? So hype song for me is when they're going to get the full Vernā Myers, what song is playing in your head? Or if you're having a bad day, what song do you play to pick yourself up? And they could be the same song or different ones.
Well, I love music, and music is a complete motivator for me. But I have to say that Jill's Got Golden is by far, that's my walk-on music. That's my happy music. That's my music that reminds me of who I am and how I was created and the gifts that I've been given. There is just something so me in that song.
Mm-hmm. It is a good song. It is. It gives you that I am, and you can expect it. So I love that. Okay. So I believe that branding really starts from the values that you get when you're growing up. And so my question for you is, where did you grow up and how did that shape you?
Yeah, I grew up in Baltimore City, and I was just giving a commencement speech and sort of reflecting on this idea of why I am where I am right now. And, I got the gift of two very sturdy, kind, logical, hardworking, responsible, principled parents. Mm-hmm. And they insisted that we reflect integrity, honesty, respect, that we have principles. And also it was working class. So I didn't even have to, like, they didn't have to tell me that hard work is necessary, although they did. I just watched them and I watched them sacrifice and I watched them put us first but also require a lot from us. And so I think that shaped me. It helped me be a really hard worker, to really believe in principles. And also my dad was sort of more of the one who was about discipline and loyalty and those kinds of values. My mom was love conquers all.
Aw.
And, she really gave me a lot to think about faith-wise. So I grew up in a believing household, which means that, all things are possible. So I think that those have shaped my understanding of the world. And also, Martin Luther King was assassinated when I was just turning 8 years old. And I was in one of the cities that burned as a response to what had happened, the horror that had visited us, and not just Black people, but the whole country. And as a little girl, I just remember thinking, I have to be what he died for. Like, I want to be an embodiment of his dream.
Wow. As a little kid.
Because you
Wow.
study him in elementary school. I mean, if you're my age, you're listening to his speeches and everything, and it never occurs to you as a little kid that someone will be murdered that or you feel like and you're connected with. And so, that really had a huge, huge effect on how I saw myself in the world.
Wow. So tell me about your education journey.
Yeah, so this is so interesting and part of the whole MLK thing, which is when the city started burning down and everybody was showing their righteous anger, folks got a little afraid and then maybe a little awakened, and they started allowing Black kids like me from working class backgrounds. We got pools. We got to go to enrichment classes after school. We got to go to any school we wanted to in the entire city. So I took 3 buses to go to a middle school that had a really great reputation. That took me to a magnet school, or a exam school, they called it. And then that took me to Barnard, which then took me to Harvard, which then took me to very prestigious law firms in Boston. And then ultimately I made a different decision as to whether I was going to practice law. But that's sort of how it all came together.
Yes, I remember we had a Massachusetts connection. I was like, oh, that's right. You were in Boston. I went to school in Massachusetts. I went to boarding school. And then
Which school did you go to?
Deerfield Academy.
Oh, sure. I know Deerfield. Yes.
Yes. And then I went to UMass Amherst, go UMass for a little bit. And so, yes, that New England connection is interesting one, especially when you think about the work that we do. So,
yeah.
All right. So more about your career path. You decide you're going to go to law school, then you go to firms, and then you said, psych, I'm going to do this instead.
A couple of things occurred. One is I found myself, as they say, with child sooner than I thought. I was married and everything, but I really had planned to go much longer in my career. And then all of a sudden I was pregnant and I thought, do I like this job enough to neglect my child? Right? Because it's one of those super demanding jobs to be in one of these prestigious law firms. And I thought, first of all, there are plenty of people to do this job. Making money for wealthy people is a job. I'm not against anybody who makes that choice, but I felt like there's a better use of me. There's a better use of me.
Yeah.
And I also want to see my kid. And people are like, oh, kids are resilient. I get it. I do. But I actually wanted to be a mother. I didn't want to be a person who says, bye. And and then comes home at night and go, hi, and do like a bath and a book. And then that's that. You know, I said to my husband, my now ex-husband at one point, then he was a physician. And I was like, we have a dumb life. We only have 2 sets of clothes. We have like our work clothes and like we have night clothes. Like I feel like we worked way too hard to have such a limited existence, you know? And so I started questioning whether I wanted to practice law. And before I left the law altogether, I had made really great relationships with some Black partners, like Black men who had become partners in the larger law firms, but then had gone off to create their own law firm. And I was sort of their daughter, you know, I was the one that they were sewing into as a mentee. And so when I decided to leave the all white, and by the way, I was the first and only Black attorney they'd ever had, and no other people of color who were serving as lawyers. So I was breaking the color line, which I thought was very bizarre, but nevertheless, and I mean, the firm was great and everything. It just wasn't the best use of me. And so I thought, maybe I'll go work with these brilliant, you know, men. And that was also awesome. And I learned a great deal and they developed me a great deal as well. And I still thought, no, there's yet a better use of me. And so that's how I became the executive director of an association called the Boston Law Firm Group. It's now called the Boston Lawyers Group or something like that, which was a consortium of law firms that it had dawned on them that there was a huge paucity of Black lawyers in the Boston law firm. And they were working on that in sort of independent ways, but then they came together as a consortium and they ultimately needed someone to run it. And that was sort of my first step outside of practicing law to actually practicing DE&I within the legal world.
Wow. So that wheels me that I'm just sitting here thinking, you think that you know somebody. This is why I love having this podcast because I could tell you about yourself quickly. I could be like, hey, this is the things, but to hear you say and add the nuances in, it's so powerful. And I love finding these areas of connection. So I started off after I decided not to practice law anymore, working at a nonprofit that helped minority law students and brought together all law firms and law students. And that was the catalyst to me doing DEI as well. So yes, there's this discomfort that you feel when you're not in the space you're supposed to be. And, you know, my mother used to say, it's like the Lord is saying, that's not for you. It'll make you uncomfortable. And I did not rest in that until I had my own business.
You know what? We cannot say that enough. And I am so grateful for your podcast because sometimes we stay too long. And, you know, when I told people that I was leaving, oh my God, there's a really interesting story too. But when I told people I was leaving the practice of law, there was just this whole like, you're going to go down, or you're leaving your training, or how can you afford this? And there's a lot of naysaying, but the naysaying is really based in other people's fear and their reasoning for not leaving something they no longer want to do, but don't feel like the courage to do so. And I will say, Paula, that I feel like my success is because early on, I learned to walk away. And when I learned to walk away, I didn't always know where the next step was. I knew the direction. I understood there was a calling, but I did not know exactly what was next. But the truth is, if you want to go, you have to leave. I know it sounds basic, but you can't go and stay. You can't do that. And often the space won't open until you step. and you can get real religious about it.
Yes,
it's faith.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've done that several times in my career. And what I've learned by doing it more than once is the ground will make its way. Like there will be a way. This is the same thing you did 15 years ago or 10 years ago. It's not different. It just feels different because sometimes it feels like the stakes are higher.
Yeah.
But I was a little poor girl coming out of Baltimore, and I graduated with so much debt that when I decided to leave the large law firm, a lot of people thought that was not wise, but I thought to myself, I can't be stuck so early. Just on GP, just on general practice, I cannot be locked into one way of living. I mean, yesterday I made $0. Okay, so I'm making a lot of money in 2 years, but yeah.
Yes, to all of that, you have to, in order to go, you got to leave.
It's so basic.
You can't stay and go at the same time. Yes, and like I tell all my mentees, anybody who will listen, if you can bet on anybody, bet on yourself.
Yes.
Bet on yourself.
Yes.
There's that. So you are a pioneer. I know this for sure because one, it says it in your bio, but two, because I know you and know that the work that you have done. Tell me about some pivotal points in becoming a DEI pioneer.
Yeah. So, it's interesting because coming back from Netflix, which is a pivotal point, right? It's my last pivot, quite frankly. Yeah. Well, who knows what most recent pivot, right? Which is that you go from having your 20 plus years, 25 plus years, your client is so convincing. And I had said no to a lot of clients, but this client, Netflix there was something about it. And I said, you know what? You've been giving advice for 20 some years. It might be time for you to see how well your advice actually works inside of a company that is about excellence and has the appetite for DE&I. And so that was clearly a pivot to go in, and then another pivot to come out, which is to say these 5 years have been awesome. I'm definitely a better consultant, I think, as a result of it, because I understand the obstacles better than I did before I went in. But I'm getting older, and if this is my last act, I want to do it on my terms. In my company, right? Because we never let the company go. And that was also the grace of Netflix to be like, yeah, you can keep it. Like, you don't have to let it go. And so for me, that was like a real game changer. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And so coming back to my own business, and I now have the moniker of a pioneer. I mean, people were saying it before. Like when I went to Netflix, people were like, whoa, Netflix just scored, And I thought, wow, that's really interesting to hear. And it was like, it just warmed my heart. Or a couple of people were like, I hope they know what they got. That is when you start to know your brand. You're like, whoa, check this out. Yes. But now I'm like the pioneer. And some people would be like, don't call me grandma. But I really love that piece of my brand because it is a recognition of how much I have worked in this area and the expertise I bring, not the perfection I bring, but the expertise and the experience I bring. So those two pivots were important. The other pivot, the first pivot where I left the law firm, really important. And I ultimately joined this consortium. But then I pivoted after 5 years again from that consortium to say, the Attorney General of Massachusetts asked me, can you come in and do a DEI thing in my office? I've got all of these lawyers. We represent all of the people in the Commonwealth. We need to do better.
Mhm.
this was another opportunity for me to say, does my advice really work?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so that was an interesting pivot because I also wanted to understand the political world. So I always kind of have a 5-year plan.
Yeah.
I'm not one of those people who are like straight on and you target it. I kind of have a meandering kind of way, but
Mhm.
I always have a general idea of what might be the next thing to take a look at. And so in that case, I was like, politics is something that I'm thinking about. And the attorney general was running for governor.
Mhm.
And I want to see if what I've been sort of sharing with all of the members of this consortium, whether it works
Mhm.
well in, in another organization. So that was a pivot. But I think the biggest pivot was when the attorney general lost the governor election.
Mhm.
It was obviously another attorney general. And I thought to myself, yeah, I don't think I need any more bosses. This has all been lovely. I've learned a
Mhm.
lot,
Mhm.
but I think I'm going to try to, I think I'm going to try to build something
Mhm.
that will serve
Mhm.
a larger group of people. So not just one client,
Yeah.
but a larger group of clients and individuals
Mhm.
who are seeking opportunities with among those clients. So I already knew so many law firms because I had been in the consortium. I knew a lot of people within the Commonwealth and then ultimately in New York and then ultimately in LA and then.
Mhm. Yeah, heard about Boston. Heard. I'm like, I get it. And I also am sitting here like I'm smiling because that 5-year piece, there's a lot of people who have that rhythm. And I don't think, and to your point, like it's not necessarily like, oh, it's that. And I know exactly what's going to happen in that. But there's just something that says it's time for us to do something else here. And I'm in year 12 of my business full time. I did it as my like part-time gig.
Yes.
And then did full time. And at 10, I was like, oh, I got to figure out what I'm going to do. Meanwhile, I was like, I know I'm not going to do anything that's not inside the business, but I was like,
Yes.
I need to do something that ups it, that makes it more exciting for me. Because what I love about being a speaker and consultant is that I get to decide and I get to innovate and people can come along and thankfully they do, but it's not, I'm like, I can't be bored. So I don't want to be boring. So we got to figure out stuff to do, which is why this podcast was birthed, because I was like, hey, I can do this.
I love that. We sound so similar. The nice thing about your own business is that you're always looking to improve your own business, right? Yeah. And I went from having up to maybe 20 some consultants, independents who worked with me. Yeah. And that I built a number of careers around, brought in people who I thought would be good to do the work because ultimately I had way too much work to do by myself. And then I had 2 other people who were mostly like acted as partners, but weren't quite partners. And then I was like, we still need more people. But then there was a point where I decided I'm not going to do the large group anymore. So I think I grew and shrunk my business maybe 3 times, and then went to a solo practice right before I went, a couple of years before I went to Netflix. And by that time I was keynoting and I was high level advising, and I realized I missed some of the nitty gritty on the ground work and a lot of the workshopping and a lot of the assessments, et cetera. I missed that and I was worried about it because I knew that I wanted to continue to touch the entire organization. But what I decided is like the best use of me again was either in the keynotes, we have the very large audiences, or leadership training and leadership advising. And then we went to producing the courses. So the courses would allow me to actually be in front of people and talking to people, just not being there.
Yeah. Yes. Literally just laid out what I want to do.
And the books too, like the books make a difference. People come up to you and they're like, I read this book, or I saw your TED Talk or whatever. So you realize that you don't have to be in person to have an impact, and that kind of frees you up.
Yes, yes. I'm just going to take that snippet and put it in my vision board. So anyway,
Yes.
love that. And I want to go back to the part about you being a pioneer in this space, and then thinking about the fact that I think of the word as somebody who obviously, started doing the thing and is a visionary. But I love that it's part of your brand proposition now, primarily because during COVID and after George Floyd, so many people were DEI consultants. And it was like, okay, well, you're new to this game. We've been here. And so it actually differentiates you from folks who are just saying that they are DEI speaker, right? Because you've been there, done that, and you're still doing it and doing it even better. So I wanted to pull that the longevity and the continued excellence is a part of the pioneer piece that a lot of people can't say. So
yes.
Point of,
and I will say that pioneer and perspective go hand in hand. So again, when I came back to sit back in this seat, I had no idea we were going to be in this world of DEI backlash. I was like, what?
Yeah.
And all of this misinformation and the ways in which some organizations, and I want to say some, and I don't want to overstate it, there are plenty of companies and organizations that are going straight ahead and continuing with their work on DEI, and they are not coward at all. And then there are some that are worried and that are pulling back. And then, as you said, there are people within our industry that know what they're doing and are doing a good job of pulling through this period. For other folks who were new and don't have the perspective and may not have the skills and may not have done their own personal work, and they may have set up things in a way that was not strategic. And so as a pioneer, I am also bringing the perspective, which is, okay, y'all, settle down, dig in, be strategic, excel in your work, speak your vision, keep your courage, row forward. And this is not necessarily new. Retrenchment is something that happens a lot. We have seen it throughout the decades. And this does seem to be like a very interesting brand of it. I'm not going to lie. I sometimes too get very like, I sometimes are like, okay, this is unbelievable that we're going to say that DEI is anti-Semitic. What? How is DEI anti-Semitic? And as a pioneer, I'm always going, let me lean in. I have learned that when you have resistance, there are some people who are very intentionally trying to defeat what you're doing. But then there are a lot of people who are concerned or fearful and misinformed. And those are the folks you need to spend your time with.
Fear and misinformation is literally the brand of our society right now. And people are taking advantage of it. And the challenge is we are moving into this space where folks cannot dialogue about difference respectfully and educatedly, right? And to hear without it being name calling and finger pointing, and to the point about having a book about, what did that mean? What did you say? And why did you say these things? I attribute a lot of this to the post-pandemic. I think that we're all in trauma and don't want to feel discomfort. Right. And so you have places like Florida who are literally like, in our laws, we don't want to feel discomfort, but we still have to navigate what has happened and who we all are. Right. Robert Gray was on the podcast the other day, and he said, that train has left the station. We're diverse. Like, we can't go back. We can't pull it back. As much as you try, it's going to continue to pop up. And that resistance is what, to your point, that we've seen over and over and over again. But we've also seen bullying, right? We see bullies all the time. And so I'm not scared. I just am frustrated that people are feeling that some of this should be acquiesced to.
I've been hearing this whole idea about like rebranding.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I think the move is not the rebrand, it's the re-education.
Yeah.
My problem with the rebrand is that I worry that people are not going to do the work.
Mm.
You know, if you are rebranding and planning to do the work that is hard, the work that hasn't been done, do what you need to do. I'm not against that.
Mm-hmm.
But if rebranding is just covering and minimizing the way in which you are taking on the work that must be done, then I don't think that's where we should be thinking. I don't think we should use our energy that way. I think we should be using our energy to be imaginative and creative. There's still an enormous amount of work to do in DEI. There's an enormous amount of like vocabulary and strategy that we can develop to address inequity. We just got to equity. And it's a complicated, complex idea that most folks have a hard time understanding. Now, I would say some of the younger generation, they get it. They understand structural, they understand it's not just personal, they understand group, they understand a lot of what needs to be thought through. However, there are many people who have been ill-informed and uneducated and are, I would say they believe in neutrality. They don't really understand that to be neutral is to be complicit because bias is embedded in all of the structures. So unless you're doing the work to get out the bias, you are passively biased. And a lot of people don't want to hear that.
They sure don't. They sure do not. You know, I think about the rebrand of DEI in sort of two ways. When you wear camouflage, you wear it so that you can sneak by and do the same thing you need to do. Or you wear camouflage so you're not seen and not even regarded at all. And to your point, if it just is to say like, okay, we're never going to use the word diverse anymore. We're just going to say whatever the insert word here. Fine, if you're still doing the work, right? It still doesn't take away the definition, but hiding and then more, I think I'm so frustrated about this is the people who are now very vocal being like, this is a waste of my time. Right. I don't know why, right? We should be focused on business. And I'm like, so who does business? Until the robots take over, it's people who do business.
And yesterday I was talking to someone who was talking to me about the aging, the aging of the generations and what is happening in the workplace and how important it is benefits wise for organizations to actually think about who is among them in their employees. Yeah. And he also said, your client base, your customer base, are you really not going to examine the different groups of people that you want to attract and that you want to have use your product or feel reflected in the work that you are doing? I mean, seriously, this is, if you want to future-proof your business, if you want to be a client of choice, if you want to be an organization where you are serving excellently all of the people who are your customers or your clients, this is work you must do.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And it's not separate work. It's work that that needs to embed itself into every single thing. And when people say to me, well, Paula, we're experiencing a lot of diversity fatigue here. And I go, are you experiencing accounting fatigue too? Because this is a core business function. So when you get that, do you not do accounting? Are you just like, forget it, we're not writing more checks? No, you push through even when things are hard. And then, life is not easy, but we're lifing with other people. And so I know we just jumped into like 4 of my questions at one time, which is nice. So I want to go back to something.
Yes.
When you were at Netflix, what were a few of the highlights for you in that role?
Wow, there were just so many highlights. I mean, partly I interviewed like 100 VPs when I started to get a very clear understanding of where they were coming from. And I came back to my friend, who's also I brought her from my company to Netflix. And so we'd worked a lot together. She's also a lawyer. And I was like, where are the resistors? I just talked to 100 people. Are they either they're just lying to me straight out, or we have found ourselves in a new world? So part of it was just the enthusiasm for inclusion. And they had already done a great job on representation, but they were at that stage where they had to realize that this was actually a profession and it was a discipline, and they needed a person who could come in, because they had that initial really positive idea. We are all responsible for inclusion. Absolutely. And many of us don't know what we're doing. So we have to hire a team. And also what was also glorious was that I was given every resource I needed, that I could build a team all over the world without resistance. Another highlight, of course, was seeing what we started producing. And I'm not saying that my team was responsible for it all, but what we did do is to make sure to teach all leaders what inclusion is and how to have an inclusion lens. So the real highlights is when you just happen upon some fabulous thing that's being shown, or a new, or we sign another really fabulous talent, or somebody in the tech world has figured out how to do something where people who can't hear can still see the subtitles, or the people who are able to, who can't see and they can listen. Like, you're just like, our team had nothing to do with that. Right? So you start to see people pick up the message and run with it and integrate it into their day-to-day practice. That was a highlight. Learning more about the world and DEI all over the world.
Wow.
Was very powerful, because what you recognize is the work of diversity and equity inclusion is relevant everywhere, but it shows up differently and it looks different. And also my own growth. Paula, I'm better. I'm definitely better. I'm a better leader. I understand DEI across culture much more than I did before. I have been humbled because DEI is something that I had to reach an entire another level, because Netflix is about excellence, innovation. So I remember one day waking up early on after being in LA. So I immediately left and went to LA to take on this job. And I remember one day waking up and saying to myself, in temporary housing, and saying to myself, how in the world did I get here? This job is demanding so much from me. And I was really on a nice, smooth trajectory, right? And this is where, and you say, and I said to myself, how did I get here? And then this voice came over me and said, yeah, you asked to be used at your highest potential. I was like, oh, be careful what you ask for. And then I got up and took a shower and went to work. But it was an opportunity that was about really increasing my competency. and learning I had never actually run a big team. And I had never actually been an executive within a, very prominent company that was all about innovation and feedback and excellence. Yeah. So it was a good move for me in many ways.
I love hearing the reflection about how it shifted you, because it's also, I remember when it was announced that you were going to be in this role and people were like, Vernā, Netflix, Vernā. And branding is like when you align yourself with another great brand, and both of you did that. Netflix did that with you and you did that with Netflix. It was like, boom, what's going to come out of this? And I'm telling you, every single time I watch something, I was like, I'm sure Vernā had something to do with that. I don't care if it's true or not. That's what I was saying. So
I love that.
She did that. Bridgerton, it was her fault. She did it. It's fine. All of those things, because I think of when you come in and are catalyst, it's kind of like everybody has on shades that you gave them. Their lens is different.
Yeah.
So that even if you aren't the person who wrote the script, they heard you talk about the importance of considering those things seep into the ethos, and that's where the impact is. And I think it's clear the impact. And so on behalf of all your fans, we're proud of you. So there's that.
Thank you. That word impact gets used a lot at Netflix. And when I was leaving, the number of people through the tears and a lot of people I can't believe you leaving. I can't believe it. And I was like, I got to go to my next thing, y'all. I'm old. Okay. I gotta go. But the joy, and I am so grateful for this gift of people coming to you and telling you the impact that you had on them personally, on how they do their work, on how the company has changed.
I love that.
There's really not a lot better than that.
Okay, so let's talk about biggest challenges and biggest opportunities you think for DEI initiatives today.
Yeah.
Start with challenges, because there's so many.
Yeah. I think I spoke to it a little earlier, but imagination. We can't do things the way we've been doing them, even though, not all the things. Obviously, there's some things we must stick to. And the history of DEI is that it has continued to evolve. That's the excitement about DEI. I think it's one of the most generative types of work we have ever done in this country and in these workplaces, in the workplace in particular. And you got to remember, this started off in the 60s. Maybe you can go back a little bit to the 50s, civil rights. We passed the civil rights laws, 64, 65. We then start doing, anti-discrimination work. We go to affirmative action. We actually then start realizing the law itself and compliance is not going to be enough. We need to educate. We need to help people understand their roles. We went from diversity, like what's the demographics, to inclusion. We went from inclusion to understanding it's great to have these people in, and it's great to have one or two of the folks in the executive ranks, but the whole group is not being brought along because of these structural impediments. So now we need to pay attention to equity. We started to recognize that belonging, psychological safety are all parts of this work. We really started to pay attention to allyship. So this is an ever evolving piece of work. And we started mostly with Black men. Because it was men. Right? And then white women started being like the major beneficiaries of the work. And we were like, okay, we actually also need to bring in women of color. We need to talk about Latin Latin folks,
Mhm.
Latinos, Latinas. We
Mhm.
need to actually start talking about people who are impoverished. We
Yeah.
need to talk about people who are first generation. We started to I think the best thing about DEI, and I know people were worried about it, and I know people continue to worry about it. Like, if we expand, are we not going to actually pay attention to where some of the most difficult problems seem to congregate around race and class, et cetera?
Mhm.
That doesn't have to be the case.
Right.
What we have to recognize is that there is no hierarchy of oppression. We really do need to find a way, and I'm calling it the beloved community. And
Mhm.
in that beloved community, which I took from my hero, Martin Luther King, are people of all backgrounds.
Yep. Yep.
We must find a way that people who care about creating a loving, caring, respectful, safe environment for all people, how we find each other and use that strength, use that unity to continue to evolve. So that means we have to keep listening.
Mhm.
People
Mhm.
are saying, I'm not feeling it. We do need to not do the knee-jerk thing. And the knee-jerk thing is so easy to do. Believe me, I have to pull my knee under the desk a lot
Mhm.
and remind
Mhm.
myself, Renee, you must listen.
Yeah. Yeah.
You must listen, you must embrace, you must understand,
Mhm.
because we have got to find another way. The polarization, hatred, the depression, the burnout. No, so imagination is huge,
Mhm.
courage is huge,
Mhm.
real curiosity
Mhm.
is another area that I think we need to work in, and compassion.
Oof. Compassion. Yeah. Yes. Yes. When we remember that we're all literally all in this together, whether or not we want to be. We are. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
all of those need to be integrated into how we operate individually, but also how we structure policies and practices and systems. And we can't be afraid to look at things that maybe were neutral on their face, but with further examination are actually disadvantaging groups of people over and over again, and have for a while, and therefore we must change them. And so that's where I think the future is. The future is trying to articulate that DEI is not for some, it is for all.
Mm.
And I have actually said, for those of us who are like storming the gates, it's not that we're better than anybody.
Mhm.
It's that we want better for everybody. And
Oh, that's
that
two
is the
t-shirts.
distinction.
Renee, you got those are two quotes that you have to put on t-shirts
Okay,
immediately.
that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing. Because
Yes.
sometimes I have to remind my people, I need
Mhm.
to remind them, y'all, we not better.
Mhm.
We not better.
Mhm.
We certainly aren't better when we think we are better.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yes.
know,
Ego gets in the way
that,
a lot.
yes, that judgment,
Yeah.
and I know it's hard. I know it's hard. I wrestle with it myself,
Mhm.
but you have to be willing. And I'm writing a new book about it. You have to be willing
Mhm.
to cease the judgment. If you're not willing to cease the judgment, it ain't gonna go anywhere, because it's a stubborn force in us.
Welcome to my therapy, y'all. It's just so ego gets in the way of so many other wonderful things. And when the ego comes together collectively, it looks like privilege often. And it gets in the way of a lot of things. And then we get stuck and then we get angry. And it's just this circle. So I'm glad to hear that you're writing another book. And you definitely have to come back when it comes out so that we can talk about it.
Yes, I would happy to.
I knew this was going to go quickly, and I knew I wasn't going to get to all the questions I wanted to ask you. So no matter what, you have an open invitation to be in the branding room whenever you want to just talk about anything. You just let me know, and happy to do that. But before we end, I have to ask you the two questions that I ask everybody on the podcast, which is, one is your stand by your brand. What is an aspect of your brand that you will never compromise on?
I tell it like it is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I know whether you're my client. One of the things that I did is to express, after I talked to a bunch of people, the CEO at Netflix asked me, what do I think? I sat down with the board and I told them.
Mhm.
And I had things to tell them that they probably didn't know and they didn't want to necessarily hear, but they were like, okay.
Yep. Yep.
And the next thing I knew, I was not a consultant anymore. I was an employee, and I was running this practice. And so I need to tell you what I think.
Mhm.
That's why you are hiring me.
Mhm. Mhm.
Now, I don't need to beat you up.
Mhm.
I don't need to shame you. I don't need to blame you, but I need to tell you what I think is going to help you.
Mhm.
And that I will always stand by.
Yes. The consultant credo. You hired me, listen. But anyway, okay, my final question for you is branding room only is a play on the term standing room only because I'm clever. And so I ask you, what is the aspect about you? What is the experience that people would want to be in a room, standing room only, to be with an experience about you?
I'm going to say this because people have said this to me.
Mm-hmm.
Inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
In these times, people need to believe. They don't need to be removed from reality. They need to understand their role in creating the reality that they say they want.
Mm.
And so my job is, I thought about the word inspire, comes from spirit, the same base of spirit, or enthusiasm, which comes really from the whole idea of theo and God. My joy and my way of being is to impart as much, to breathe as much into you as possible so that you understand what you're capable of. We sometimes forget, Paula. We have so many limits that we've imposed or have been imposed upon us, and then we start to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And my work in a standing room audience is to mirror the miracle that we each are.
Wow. That was like a drop the mic, toss it off of my desk moment. Vernā, I knew this was going to be a fantastic conversation. I truly, truly appreciate your wisdom and your humor and your innovation and your excellence. And I'm telling you, everybody, go tell everyone to listen to this podcast, download it, like it on your favorite platform, and most importantly, send it to that leader who needs to hear it, and hire Vernā. Vernā, thank you for being in the branding room. You're welcome back anytime. Talk to y'all later. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Wasn't that fantastic? I am so grateful to Vernā Myers for spending the time to chat with me about her journey and about the next steps in her DEI journey and how much she learned at Netflix and just the inspiration that we all needed to be able to navigate through the challenging times that we're in right now. I hope that you run and tell everybody to listen to this podcast and remember that diversity is like being invited to the party and inclusion is like being asked to dance. Trademark. Talk to you all soon and see you in the branding room next time.